Hello, dear students. Very good morning to all of you. May I have a confirmation from one of you that it's audible? Thank you so much, Ms. Shreya. Good to see Ms. Shreya after a long period of time. Sharing my screen with you. Okay. Now the interface of this Google Meet has changed a bit. Can someone just confirm that my entire screen of PPT is visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you so much. Okay, so we had completed the various sources of finance, basically the long term and some advanced sources of finance, which are very fresh and new to the world. Uh, then we were there into short term sources of finance, which we couldn't complete last time around. So let's begin with the short term sources. As the name itself suggests, it is taken to finance our day to day requirements. So when I use the day to day requirements, that means it's about managing my working capital. Working capital. So, sir, what do you mean by the working capital? So, working capital is interpreted in two ways. One is gross, another one is net. Now, when I say gross, that means current assets, the total of current assets. And when I say net, that means current assets minus current liabilities. Now, current assets and current liabilities are there in your financial statements for a short frame of time, right? For some number of months, for some number of days. Now, how do you effectively manage your working capital requirements? That is the thing where majority of the business gets stuck. If you analyze the primary reason behind the failure of various startups, it's the lack of effective working capital management policy. Because if you take other areas of financial management, no, one is the finance decisions, capital structure decisions, where you seek the finance from the various sources. Now that is also a one-time exercise because you do not ask for the equity every point of time frequently, right? It's a one-time exercise, and for so many number of years you will just keep on running your business from the finance you have gathered. Similarly, if you take another area of finance which is related to investments, capital budgeting, say you are investing into a long term projects, so which projects would be more feasible, more appropriate to you? That is also a one time activity, does not involve the frequent input from your sides. And one more thing is that you can take the help of the expert as well in taking those decisions. But when it comes to working capital management, that is a day to day activity and exercise to be done on a daily basis. That's where these businesses are getting stuck. How to manage the cash credit effectively so that there would be no disturbances in the overall performance of the business. So that's where we take the help of short term sources of finance, and that is to be used very smartly because that is very expensive as well. If you take some of the unsecured loans from the bank for a short frame of time, they come up with the great amount of interest. So it should be used very appropriately, sufficiently, and it shouldn't be used in an excessive manner because after some point of time we'll be realizing that how much money that has been spent over there. Immediately we may not be able to realize that. So these are the various sources of finance. One is the bank credit. You people are aware about it. The bank gives you the credit in terms of the cash credit, directly the loan, or it may just give you the overdraft facility. That means you can withdraw the more amount of money as compared to what you have in your bank account. So say you have just 1 lakh rupees in your bank account and you want to withdraw 2 lakhs rupees, that is the overdraft facility given to you by the bank. Or it may just straight away give you the plain Bank credit in terms of rupee can also be called as the cash credit. Now that is the short term sources of finance. Once you have got the money from your debtors after selling the goods, you will return back that money within a very short frame of time. Then it comes the customer advances. So that is basically the debtors, my friend. And if you take the money from the debtors in advance, that is also a source of finance, no? Now, see, for this, every decisions in the financial management, no, are from the spectacles of time value of money, the opportunity cost. Say you are taking the money from your customers in advance, obviously that money will be utilized further in the business, or it may be invested somewhere into goods or some other securities or assets, or it would be just put into a bank account where you will be fetching some interest, right? So it's always better to take the money from the customers in advance if it is possible to do so. Now that depends upon the prevailing market situation, the kind of the competitiveness we have in the market, the existing and prevailing terms and conditions with which the people gives the loans and advances. So this everything matters. And if it is possible, it is always advisable to take the money from debtors in advance before supplying the goods, because the amount of benefits you get from this, you'll not be able to realize immediately. Let me just give you a very simple example. Say you have, 1 lakh rupees of sales on a daily basis. Try to understand this. So if you have 1 lakh rupees of sales on a daily basis, and my friend, you receive that 1 lakh rupees, say 3 days in advance. Try to understand. So 3 days in advance, that means if that money will remain with you for three more number of days, you get say 8% interest on it on a per annum basis. So accordingly, you may just put it for number of days. Say you are earning 25 rupees more because of this. Now that is only on the 1 day sale. And if you would be having similar number of sales for all this number of days in a year, say multiplied by 365, so you can imagine the type of additional money you would have fetched just because, or you would have saved just because you have taken the money in advance from the customers. So 1 lakh rupees of sales you have on a daily basis, you have received it for 3 more days in advance. You receive say 8% interest on it on per annum basis. You convert it into a per day basis, and say just 25 rupees of value addition you are making on a daily basis. Just multiply that with 365, because 365 number of days would be there for sales. Now that amount looks significant, right? Now these are the very small decisions which changes the the destiny of the businesses. Those people who do not have the good money management skills, in spite of having the great technical and the great scientific knowledge, may not be able to survive. That's what we have seen in the professionals as well. This money saving habits are the most important habits when it comes to building the overall wealth, for the long period of time. Then it comes the trade credit. That means you take the credit from your suppliers now. Your suppliers are the suppliers of goods and services from whom you are taking the goods for further manufacturing or further sale. Try to take as much as credit possible from their side. That is also a source of finance. Some people would be like, sir, how that is a source of finance? Say you are supposed to give them the money right now, and if you take the credit of 3 months from them, then you will be making the payment to them after 3 months. So that money would remain with you, and you are not going to keep that money idle, right? You will be utilizing that further by putting it in a bank account. And even if you just put it in a savings bank account, no, then also it fetches somewhere around 3 to 4% of the interest on per annum basis. What's wrong in that? Try to take the credit as much as possible. That's what the hard reality of this finance world is, you know. You try to take the money as early as possible from your customers, and you try to give the money to your suppliers as late as possible. And striking of the balance between the two is what the task of the financial manager. Then it comes to the factoring. Now, factoring is quite a famous exercise in the metro cities, but I don't know what's the status of that activity in Rajkot. I mean, how famous is that? But when it comes to Mumbai, I have spent majority of my life over there till now. Uh, there are various agencies for the factoring, you know. So basically, what happens that you sell your debtors to those agencies. So you have got the debtors of 1 lakh rupees. So you sell that debtor to an agency. Now that agency would be collecting 1 lakh rupees on behalf of you. What happens is that this factor agency will straight away give you some amount of money against your debtors straight away. You know, say 98,000. So 2,000 rupees would be charged by them as a commission. Now, why they are charging 2,000 rupees as a commission? Because they are taking the risk of collection of debtors. Now the risk of bad debts is transferred to those agencies. So those agencies would be primarily responsible to collect the money from debtors. The risk of bad debt is transferred, and against which they have got 2,000 rupees of commission. Why you would be doing such kind of a deal? You want 98,000 rupees right now, because you know that if that 98,000 would be utilized in your business, no, then it would be collecting much more than 1 lakh rupees, because the type of return we get in a business would be quite high. What is the percentage of commission you have given on it? Try to understand. 2,000. So 2,000 would be 2% of your total money. But you are aware that if you will be occupying that money in your business, the opportunity cost is too high. And on sales, if you have 7 or 8% of the margin of profitability, then you can understand that 6 or 7% of the additional money you will be able to generate if you will be doing the more amount of sales, provided you have the demand in the market, you know, for your goods and services. So basically, it's occupying that money somewhere into a productive purposes where it will fetch some return, which would be obviously more than the commission charged by this factors. You are just relieving of your assets, and those factors are taking that risk because they are getting some commission, because it's their business. They have got some network and distribution which will be collecting this money from the debtors. They have some advanced tracking systems as well, through which they can track the people. They have the good network as well in various areas of the cities and states, you know. So they are in a better position to take the money from the customers instead of the company, you know. Now sometimes company would not prefer to establish their own cash management network. That might be too much expensive as well. Say if the company is giving the short term loans to the customers across the state, then if company would have its own in-house department for collection of the cash from various customers across the cities and areas of the state, you can imagine the type of capital expenditure would that would involve over there, you know. So instead of incurring such capital expenditure in the in-house building facility, let's give it to someone else who has already got that facility, and he or she would just be charging some percentage of the interest on the amount of debtors. So it's a win-win position for both of them. So that's why there can be a factoring kind of an agreement. You receive the money in advance. Obviously, that money would be, that money was supposed to be received by you after 3 or 4 months once the credit term to your debtor gets over. But now, right now, you're receiving it. So that's basically the source of finance only. You will be able to utilize it for more number of periods now. Then it can be money market instruments which can be issued by the company. Now commercial papers are there, certificates of deposits are there. Not everyone can issue it, obviously. To issue the commercial paper, you first require the permission from the Securities and Exchange Board of India and the Reserve Bank of India as well. But some big gigantic corporations indulge themselves into such kind of the practice as well, where they issue the money market instruments, to take the short term finance from the people at large. So these are basically the promissory notes that I'll be paying you, say 1,000 rupees after 3 months at 9% of the interest per annum basis. So these promissory notes are issued obviously nowadays in the electronic format. Earlier it was in a physical format. So these money market instruments are also available. But as far as the small startups and businesses are concerned, that is out of our reach. Then it comes the bill discounting. So you collect the bills from your customers. Now you go to the bank and you tell to the bank that, see, these are the bills I have got. So banks would be collecting those bills from you, and banks would straight away give you some money after taking their commission as a discount. So say the bills were worth 1 lakh rupees and banks have taken 1,000 rupees as a discounting charge, and 99,000 would be returned back to a customer. Now that depends on the type of agreement you enter with that bank. So banks may also facilitate such kind of transactions where you just collect the bills from your customers. You are supposed to receive the money from them after some number of periods and months, but banks would be straight away giving it to you right now. And what banks gets in return, they get the discount in return. And if customers will not be making the payment, then these banks have got the security of those goods as well, which are part of that bill. So if in that bill, say a few amount of goods are sold in a quantity, then those goods might be hypothecated or pledged by bank as a security while giving the amount of money to that provider of bill. So this is how this short term arrangement works. There are a few other things as well, but you may explore that. I'll be sharing the documents with you. As far as the exports are concerned, there are a few arrangements related specifically explicitly to the exports, like credit granting commission for exports and everything, letter of credit, and few other sources. So that I'm keeping for the self study, because right now my major focus is on the long term sources of finance. And I'm sharing that document with you. You may read that further. May I have the confirmation that you have got till now whatever the things we have discussed, everyone? Confirmation from the students, please. Received it from Mr. Jaydev, Mr. Mitesh as well. Good. Miss Veronica too. Nice to see that. Miss Hemali, Dipesh. Good. And friends, there is one concept called crowdfunding as well, not very famous in India. That is also a very fresh source of finance. Basically, crowdfunding is used in India for some voluntary services, non-finance services, basically for donations and some of the things related to non-business activities. So I'm just taking you to that crowd finance document as well, so you will get the brief overview of that too. Right, so there are 4 types of crowdfunding actually available in India and across the globe. One is the donation crowdfunding, where you give, this websites would be developed by this crowdfunding portals, and you can just go over there in that portal and donate some amount of money for some cause. You must have seen that through Facebook or some through social media channels, the people may gather the funding as well. So some of the uh, funding things are very unorganized, but some are very organized as well. So some of them are, yeah, if I give you some examples like Milap, Keto, these are the foundations. They are operating in a very organized manner. They have got their own websites. You get the receipt of whatever the donation you make. They have got some reliability as well. So rather than investing at some random sources, if we go to those websites, at least the reliability may be, secured. So one is the donation crowdfunding, where you give the donation by using their websites for the causes, poverty eradication, some of the social causes. Some people might be there in a serious health troubles, and you finance their requirements. Then it comes the reward crowdfunding. So in return, you basically get some reward and vouchers. So say you get the voucher of 500 rupees, maybe utilize somewhere at e-commerce portals, or while delivering your food or services from online services. So it may be a reward based, it may be a peer to peer crowdfunding, where one person would be giving the loan to another person by using a website or portal. Now, there are no restrictions as far as these three are concerned. But when it comes to the equity crowdfunding, no, then in India there are restrictions. Uh, in some of the countries globally, some advanced countries of Europe, this equity crowdfunding is also allowed. So that would be a replacement of the IPO process. You know that sometimes companies would be issuing directly the equity and through their websites, and through their websites, the people may invest into equity directly. But right now in India, it's prohibited. So let's go to some of the portals available in India. BitGiving is one of those portals. Milap is there. Keto.org is there. Start51 is there. These are some of the examples where the crowdfunding is done. Basically, if I tell you about the Indian scenario, no, they are primarily used for some social causes, non-business causes. But I am sure that in upcoming number of years, it will gain the momentum for the business transactions as well. So we'll see that in some years to come, the money would be raised directly from the public at large in terms of loans or some deposits. But that is a very highly regulated field. There should be some great transparency improvements in the system in order to facilitate such kind of transactions, because it's ultimately investors will be at the loss. And there has to be some good regulations to protect the investors. So in upcoming number of years, we may see some major advancements taking place in this sector. I'll be sharing with that this document as well to you, so you may explore that further. Okay, is it clear, my friends? That is all about the sources of finance. And now we'll be moving to the cost of finance. Global giving. Yes, Miss Veronica. यहाँ तक हर कुछ clear है. Sources of finance, is everyone satisfied with whatever we have learned till now? Shall I move to the sources of finance now? Sorry, the cost of sources of finance. Okay, let's move ahead. So friend, first source of finance that we had discussed was the equity. Now here is where there is a major problem to know that what is the cost associated with that equity from the perspective of the company. Now you want to frame a capital structure which is the mix of various sources of finance, where two primarily objectives are satisfied. One is you want to maximize value of firm. Another one is you want to minimize cost of overall finance. This is what the optimum capital structure is, Now, how do you identify, first of all, that what is the cost of equity? Now, cost of equity is basically the expectations that equity shareholders have from the company, right? Now, how do we evaluate? How do we measure? What are their expectations? Equity shareholders are too many in numbers. You cannot have the survey form. You cannot analyze each and everyone's requirement. That is not practically feasible either. What can we do? There are a few models established by some financial experts which tries to take into account the expectations of the equity shareholders by taking the risk and return behavior of them, So one of the models is the capital asset pricing model, quite famous in the finance fraternity. This model is used for valuation of the securities, to identify the expectations of the equity shareholders, to see that what would be the potential cost of company towards the equity they have raised, So this model tells you that, see, the basic expectation of any equity shareholder is the risk-free rate. Now, risk-free rate, which he or she gets from the market, from the other investment avenues and sources, that is the bare minimum expectations they have got, right? Obviously, because you are taking so much of risk in the equity, the risk of non-payment of dividend, the risk of non-payment of capital at the time of liquidation. You people are aware that when the shutdown will take place, if the company will not have the sufficient money, equity shareholders won't get any, right? They are taking too much of risk. They take the risk of fluctuation in their market prices if the company is publicly traded. So if they take so much of risk, then obviously their bare minimum expectation is the risk-free rate. Now that is from the fixed deposit, that may be from the government bonds, that may be from other securities issued by the government or the public authorities, which are risk-free in nature. There is no risk of default involved over there. If I get 7% of the return from the fixed deposit without taking significant risk, and if equity is not able to give me that percentage of return, why would I invest in the equity? So that is the bare minimum expectations. Then the investors should get some risk premium for risk. Understood that they have got the bare minimum expectation, but over and above that, they are supposed to get the premium for the risk they take. They are coming to that risky market of equity with some expectations by taking the tremendous amount of risk. So they should get some premium as well. You know what that premium is. So say if I tell you that return from the entire market minus the risk-free rate. Now that market is primarily the equity market I'm talking about. Say you are coming to the shares, then Nifty is considered to be, say, one indicator of the entire market of Nifty. I'm just taking the example. Now, the return from the entire market, which you have historically seen, at least that much of a return you will be expecting from the market for the upcoming number of years as well. So historically, say if you have got 10 or 12 or 13 or 14% of the CAGR on a Nifty, at least that much of expectations you will be having the future as well. So that would be the return from a market. And the difference between the return from a market and a risk-free rate is called as the risk premium. Obviously, because market involves many risks. So that is the risk premium you should get. But sir, that risk premium should not be equally expected from every parties. The financial position of Hemali Limited would be quite different from the financial position of the Shreya Limited. You cannot put everyone on the same paper, right? So everyone's expectations from the different companies would differ based on how sensitive these companies were in the past in terms of the returns. So that is measured by the beta. We had seen when we were discussing the risk associated with the equity, we were looking into the beta as a parameter for identifying a risk, And at that time, I had explained to you that it tells you that how your stock is volatile in comparison to the entire market. So the simple interpretation of the beta, try to understand like this. Say if the beta of the company is 1.2, it is basically the regression coefficient only. Huh? Do not get confused. It is a regression coefficient. So it does tell you that if the one variable is moving like this, then by what extent another variable would be moving. So it's a beta of an equity. Now, if the beta is 1.2, that means that if the market is giving me a 1% of the return, then this share would give me 1.2% of the return if it is a standardized beta. Similarly, when the market would be down by 1%, this stock would comparatively more down by 1.2%. So you are more sensitive as compared to the entire market. And obviously, that would be affecting the return as well, right? So when we had discussed the beta extensively, at that time I told you that if the company has got the good beta, how the expectations of the equity shareholder would be more. The one who are more volatile, the one who are more sensitive, you expect more from them, obviously. And that has been historically seen as well, proved as well, that those who have got the higher beta are performing better in the long term as well when it comes to the return. But that is a double-edged sword, It is not just applicable for the upward trends, it is applicable to the downward trends as well. If the entire market would be down by 1%, they would be by 1.2. And if the beta is say 0.6, then it tells you that if the entire market is going up by 1%, they are going up just by 0.6%. So they are less reactive as compared to the market. And similarly, they would be less reactive when there will be uncertainty as well, right? At the time when the market would get crashed, this stock would react very less as compared to the overall market. Now that beta will differ from company to company. So consequently, the expected rate of return from the share will also differ from company to company. So the equation that can be established here is that the risk-free rate plus beta in bracket in multiplication, obviously, market return minus risk-free rate. So market return minus risk-free rate is basically the risk premium, but risk premium should not be expected equally from every stock. It would differ from stocks to stock. And how it would differ based on their sensitivity we have observed till now. That is the beta. That's the cost of equity method number 1, CAPM, capital asset pricing model. Is it clear, my friends? May I have a confirmation from the students, please, that CAPM is absolutely clear? Okay, from Mr. Jaydev, Mr. Deepesh, others, any doubt or query related to CAPM? Risk-free rate plus beta of equity in bracket market return minus risk-free rate. As simple as that. That is the overall cost of equity. Now, how to find that beta? We'll be using the regression coefficient formula in that. That we'll see later on when we'll be doing the sums of CAPM practically. So that is one method. Let me take you to another method, which is just a small addition to the CAPM. So there were a few experts who came to who said that that uh, see, instead of expecting the bare minimum requirement of risk-free rate, why not to take the yield from the long-term bonds? Because the yield from a long-term bonds is the indicator of the rate of return you get from the fixed income securities on a long period of time. Now, when we explicitly say that what is the risk-free rate, at that point of time, in some of the countries, these bonds might not be included, because if the market is perfect and if there is no risk of default, if the regulations are very strong, then the bonds issued by the corporate and the government can also be called as the risk-free securities. But that will not be called as a risk-free securities in some of the countries where the markets are volatile. Well, there are too much of uncertainties on the political grounds, on economic grounds. So at that time, we use the word, say, risk-free rate. Now, risk-free rate would differ in that situation. But if the markets are perfect, if investors are rational, if there is no default risk, if every investors are protected by some insurance, if there are good regulations at a place, then the yield you get, which is nothing but the return on the long-term bonds issued by the corporates or the government of India, can also be taken as the bare minimum expectation. So my friend, the formula of the CAPM remains the same, but instead of the risk-free rate, we are replacing that with yield on long-term bonds. So that's the second method to identify the cost of equity. First, we are discussing it conceptually, then we'll be doing it in sums. Confirmation on this method, please, all of you. Long-term bond yield method, is it clear? Everyone? Good. Received it from Miss Rhea, Miss Veronica too. Nice to see that. Okay. Now the third one will be taking some time. I'll not start the discussion of the third one today because it will be taking some time. Anyway, so that's it from my side for the day. What we have done till now is we had discussed the short-term sources of finance, rapid fire revision of it. So let's go over there. We had seen the bank credit, we had seen the customer advances, the trade credits, the factoring arrangements, money market instruments to be issued by the companies, and the discounting of bills. Then we quickly got the brief overview of the crowdfunding in India or at the global scenario. You may explore that document further. I'm going to anyway distribute that. And then we came to the cost of finance, and we had started with the first source, which was equity. For other sources, we'll see later on. For equity, we have got several methods to identify the cost of equity, which is basically the expectations of the equity shareholders from a company. And we have seen two methods. One is CAPM, capital asset pricing model. Another one is bond yield plus risk premium method. Okay, so that's it from my side. As far as this lecture is concerned, you may just put your enrollment number as a mark of your attendance. Bye bye, take care. If you have any queries or doubt, I'm there with you right now. You can clarify that further. Thank you so much. Bye bye, take care. Sayonara. That's it from my side.